Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures. It's Friday, which means it's time to bring you yet some more obscurities in literature. Today's book is a book that I have not spent enough time with, and there's one main reason for that is because I've owned a good chunk of what's in here in various other forms over the years. This is the Marvel Monsters Omnibus. Sorry, Marvel Monsterbus. This is the first of a 2-volume set, at least, that covers all of the Jack Kirby drawn monsters from the Silver Age, pre-Marvel Atlas era of comicdom after the big horror market bust and EC going under. You had a lot of the more sci-fi flavored space age giant monsters, especially post-Godzilla stuff really getting popular. And to me, this is one of my favorite genres. I'll admit I do enjoy a superhero story every now and then, but this stuff was my jam. And obviously it was way before my time. I read a lot of this in late 70s reprints that Marvel was churning out, usually with new covers, but I absolutely dug the monster stuff, especially Tales of Suspense, Strange Tales. I don't know. So the thing about this book, though, is they're all Kirby drawn monster stories. Everything in here is Kirby work. Now, obviously, he did not write everything, but just looking at all these covers, and they have a quick rundown, this book is absolutely massive, and the price tag reflects that if you've ever seen any of these Marvel Omnibus books. Thankfully, a lot of these can be had for a fraction of the cost, especially around the time that they're released. So what do we have in this one? Strange Tales of the Unusual, World of Fantasy, Strange Tales, Tales of Suspense, Journeys into Mystery, Amazing Adventures, Tales to Astonish. There's just a ton of stuff. And particularly, again, only the Kirby bits. So anything by Ditko, anything by any of the other major artists that were, I know there was a guy that died in a car accident and was a big artist at the time for Atlas, but those guys, they're all gone. If you want to see those stories, and you should because they're pretty cool, what you really want to do is look for the Atlas era Silver Age Masterworks books that cover these same books. That's where I first came across most of these stories, and I absolutely loved it. My kids, especially my son, used to just grab them to flip through all the monster stories, and you can see here we have one of the most famous of the monsters, good old Groot. So upon opening it up, one thing I really dig is the fact that you can actually lay the book flat, but just the quality and this massive table of contents. It just goes on and on. So some of the stories are a bit cheesier and sillier than others, but one thing's for sure is they are all absolute Kirby. I remember reading this one. Now, some of the artwork is a little bit more simpler, rougher than others, but a lot of that can be chalked up to the various inkers that were working with him at the time. I just dig old 50s and 60s sci-fi comics. I think there was a lot of imagination there, and especially in works of Kirby where he really was just kind of going wild with whatever he wanted to come up with. Reminds me of like Basil Wolverton stuff when he was really just unleashed and unfettered. To me, it obviously is very much a product of its time, obviously. You can see a lot of similarities for what would end up eventually with books like the Fantastic Four, Challengers of the Unknown, a bit like Professor X, our bald mermaid friend there. And I do appreciate the fact that they have a lot of the covers in here, even though some of these stories weren't necessarily titles that Kirby himself ended up drawing. If you are interested in seeing a lot of those, you are going to have to go look for some of the Masterworks. Like I said, I have not checked the prices on the Masterworks in some time. Hard to say what they're asking for. Again, it's funny how some, like, there's the inks, the thickness, the blackness, the use of negative space in some of these versus other stories where it just gets, I remember that one, a lot more clean and simple. Again, very much depending on who is inking him. Those colors, too. Can't have a Kirby book without a bunch of brooding faces. Dragoon. There are a few odds and sci-fi stories. Not everything is giant monster related. I think the best stuff in here, if you dig that kind of thing. But then again, that's also the problem, is some of these can get a bit samey, especially considering how many titles Stan Lee and Kirby were pushing out at the time. It's almost something like vaguely Ditko-ish. Where's the original Hulk? Any excuse Kirby had to just draw funky monster shapes, I was all over. So yeah. Like I was saying, some of these can get a bit tropey. Some of them are pretty obvious where they're going with the story. Some of these are just kind of cheesy. But when you have a book of this size covering a good span of time, good old Goom. Goom is ridiculous. You do run into stuff that, while they aren't necessarily repeats, they do get kind of repetitive. So this is a book that I like to pull off the shelf every now and then, read a couple stories, and stick it back. Someday, I would love to get the second edition, the second volume, I should say. And I have this funny feeling that there's also, I could have sworn, a Ditko one as well. To me, the Ditko monsters were never as exciting. Some of his early stuff, like the thing with the big giant worm that was in the Ditko archives, pretty cool stuff. I think, Googam, Son of Goom. Here we go. The Ditko work is at its best when he is, coming up with brooding, mysterious stuff. Spragg, was that the name? Dr. Droom. And just crazy monsters everywhere. Trying to think of what those 70s reprints were called, like Monsters Attack or something. I don't remember. Does this one have Fin Fang Foom? Did he draw Fin Fang Foom? I don't remember now. Maybe Fin Fang Foom was in the other volume. Troll the Inhuman. Gotta watch out for those giant steam shovels. It's like Rock'em Sock'em Robots here. So yeah, there's a lot to be seen here. Absolutely, there is no denying that. Letter from Stan Lee. Ah, here we go. Some of the reprint stuff. I can remember seeing these. I had a cousin who was hardcore into collecting comics. I mean, hardcore. Had multiple letters published over the years in the backs. It had subscriptions to almost everything Marvel related. I can remember reading the original copy of The Incredible Hulk that had the first appearance of Wolverine in there. I remember reading the old Mutant Massacre books with the Morlocks and the Marauders back at his place. Anyway, he used to have a bunch of these, like Where Monsters Dwell. That's the one I was thinking of. And I can remember reading a bunch of those. So it is kind of cool to see all of these reprinted ones. Maybe it was Creatures on the Loose. I don't know. Some of this stuff sounds familiar. Some of this totally looks like just knockoffs of what DC was putting out at the time as well. Crypt of Shadows. Like House of Secrets era stuff. Good times, I think. I like when comics diversify themselves outside of superhero stuff. And looking over these covers just makes me think like, man, I want to go check out some of these. Of course, they're probably not cheap anymore. I can remember a local comic shop used to just be one to get rid of all this stuff. Used to be able to get it for a couple bucks an issue. The good old days. Weird Wonder Tales. Oh, that is some serious Kirby artwork right there. Always nice to see some of his original inks and pencils, I should say. Nice paste job there. So yeah, big massive book. And if you dig monsters almost as much as I do, I think you are going to find a lot to enjoy here. I'm not sure if this is even in print anymore or if it's totally out, and well, in that case I would suggest look for the second book, because honestly it's not like there's any ongoing story. Everything is just a quick 4 to 6 page twist of a story, and you're not going to miss a whole lot other than cool looking artwork and giant monsters if you end up with the later books in the series instead, or should I say the larger Monsterbuses. So something to think about, something to look for, and hopefully something you're going to enjoy. With that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.